Just on time, too. Okay, welcome everybody to our, what is it, February meeting? Boy, time goes by too fast. So, this is our agenda for tonight. You're stuck with me for a long time. Okay.
You can invite people in from the open door too. It's an open public meeting, right?
This is an open public meeting. Anybody is welcome.
Come on in. Find out what's going on. Come on in.
Okay. So we start with, I can't see that side of the room.
Go forward just a bit.
Yeah. There's no reason you need to have that
There we go. Thank you.
there. There's only the screen that needed to be up.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Technology changes your life in many different ways. So is there anyone here tonight for the very first time? Wonderful. So I am going to ask you to stand up, and it's not to embarrass you. Take a deep breath, you're fine. We want to know your name, and we want to know what family names you're searching, because there might be a cousin here. It's happened.
Steve and I.
Yeah, it has happened. So I'm going to start with this lady here.
Richard, and I'm really not doing anything myself. My brother's been into it very extensively. We're researching Robbins, Enlack, Ferguson, and Bateman.
Robbins,
Yes.
Imlac, Ferguson, and Bateman. Thank you, Joyce. Well, I'm glad to see you're out here supporting your brother's hobby. Awesome. Okay.
I'm Nancy Trimble. This is my husband Larry, and we're here. We're doing Amesbury
Amesbury,
in Wynn.
Wynn.
Kathleen?
Not at all.
Not at all. Okay, very quick with that. Okay, and behind them, yes, the lady with the hat.
My name is Roseanne Kay, but I'm looking for K-side, Moon, and Gillis, and Maye.
Okay, so K, what was the second one again?
Gillis.
Gillis. Mayday, did you say?
Inside, is it?
Moon,
Morn
and Maye.
and
Maye.
Maye?
Yeah.
Okay, you'll have to spell that for me at the break.
Balance spelling.
Okay. Now, I think I missed, yes, the lady in red.
I'm Noella, Lonnie had in the paper, this is my sister.
Okay, so you're doing the same thing.
Yes.
Awesome. It's great to have a research partner. It really is. And the gentleman at the end?
I'm David Bray. I'm doing the Brays from Raglan and Enfield.
Brays from Raglan and Enfield. I have wonderful memories of slogging up a muddy field in Enfield to get to the Potter's Cemetery at the very back of a 100-acre field. I think my shoes weighed 10 pounds by the time I made it out again. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much. And I don't see John. Usually he has a piece of paper you can write on, because we try to keep track of everybody and the names they're researching. If not, we'll get you the next meeting. I hope you'll come back. News, in the news. We have got now some really exciting news, because land records are finally coming online, which is really nice. Now, this is only the first phase. It is called onland.ca. If you look right here, only one of 4 categories is highlighted. The other 3 are still coming, supposedly by the end of 2018. But you can go into these books and you can actually browse them. It's really quite nice. And here's an example with the first few lines blown up. This is one of the abstract books. It isn't the documents behind the land sale, but at least it lists names and you get the land description from it.
How much have they done?
Well, they've done all the abstract books.
Oh, they have?
Yeah, they're all up there. So you've got to go in and browse. There's a little bit of a search function, and I'm finding it a little bit quirky. But I think I put in like Uxbridge, and then I've gone and tried to do Lot 3, Concession 5, and then it offers me Lot 3 and Concession 5 in all the townships. But anyway, it's there. You don't have to go to the Archives of Ontario anymore.
How far back does it go?
Right to the first grant of the land. Okay? So up here on the front, which fronts Lake Ontario, what is that, Steve? Probably late 1790s?
1796 for this area.
Yeah, 1796.
How recent does it go?
Well, I can't tell you that. You'll have to explore, Bob.
I think it's fairly recent though. I think I remember 1970s anyways.
Really?
What's
But-
what's the URL?
Onland.ca. ONLAND.ca. Okay? And the Archives has released another year of marriages and deaths. The 1936 marriages and the 1946 deaths are now on Ancestry. And if you don't have Ancestry, go to the library. They have it. You can't get it from home through the library, but you can get it on the library computers. The 1933 to 36 marriages and the 1943 to 46 deaths are also free on the Archives of Ontario computers. And now you can get there by TTC. It's up on the York University campus. It's a bit of a long haul, but at least you don't have to bus it. And Library and Archives Canada has just released a beta version of a new search tool. Formerly, you had to go into each database and use a search form for each database. This one's supposed to search several collections at once. They didn't say which collections. I'm hoping most of the ones that genealogists use. And they want feedback as to how well it's working. So you're guinea pigs. And on the library side of Library and Archives Canada, they've launched a new search engine called Voila. And it replaces
Something with a boring name.
a really boring because I can't remember it. No? Steve, come on, you've got an encyclopedic memory. No?
There you go.
Okay. But anyway, it's now called Voila, and that's for the published side of things, the library side of things. Find My Past also has a new search feature. This has been the flavor du jour, or du month, or whatever you want to say. Everybody's improving their search features, so this is good. Find My Past has been particularly hard to search, I found anyway. How about you, Steve? What's your experience with Find My Past? It was really awkward to search. So I'm hoping this search improvement will be significant. Okay, and you've got 2 more days of some of the collections being free on Find My Past. I blogged about this on Sunday on our blog, and that's our blog website, right there. And there's a link down at the bottom of the blog that'll take you to details, and we'll tell you how to get in. My understanding, it's birth, marriage, death, census, and suffragette records, because this is celebrating 100 years of the vote for women. Yay! Now on the local front, we found out the 4th of January they're tearing down our office building, which was a bit of a shock. Not only that, they told us that we had to be out by the end of April. Now, Steve's hair is gray, it's probably going to be white by the time we get that library packed up. I can say we're in negotiations with a local church and they've offered us a contract. We just have to finish all the details and then we'll let you know where our office is going to be. And possibly next fall we may even be taking our meeting there. And of course, keep June the 23rd free. That's a Saturday. We're going to do a day-long day of learning. Our theme is From DNA Connections to Database Giants. We felt a full day on DNA would be just a little too hard on everybody involved. So we also want some speakers on how to use Find My Past, MyHeritage, and Family Search. We've got our DNA speakers already, but we're still looking for people. So if you know someone who's an expert on using those lesser known websites, there's still a genealogy giant, but everybody thinks of Ancestry. So I need someone with expertise on these other 3 sites to submit proposals. Steve?
How can you sign up for this program?
We'll be announcing that at future meetings. Right now, we're just setting up the speakers. We've booked the venue. We've booked the UCW who will be catering. And once we know our speakers, then we will start advertising. Okay?
There'll probably be a link from our website as well.
Yeah. Dan always keeps it up to date for us.
And also Facebook.
Yeah. We'll put it on Facebook. We'll put it on the blog. Okay. Now locally, a little bit locally, Uxbridge Genealogy Group has got a speaker coming from the Archives of Ontario for their next meeting, which is Thursday, February the 15th, 7 p.m. at the Uxbridge Library. Serge Paquet is going to talk about Canada Company records and also how to locate them at the Archives of Ontario. So that could be an interesting talk as well. For a very small group, they do very well at getting speakers that are really quite interesting. I'll be there, but in the audience. So, now it's time for me to start on the main talk of the evening. And as I said, you got me for a while, so here we go.
Is it there?
Good. Okay. So this is basic DNA. Just along the lines of choosing a company, choosing a test, some of the factors that are involved. And I will do a more advanced one when invited for the next time we want to put a DNA topic on. Okay, so here we go. Going to start with a little survey. So, if you've heard of DNA but know nothing about it, put your hand up. If you know someone who's tested, put your hand up. If you've done a test, put your hand up. That's a really good number. Wow. Here's the next thing. Have you used the information from your test? Also a good number. Have you had answers back from your cousins? Yeah, that's a little bit harder sometimes. And if you can say to me that you could teach the lecture, I'll hand it over right now.
Wow.
No? Okay. Well, why should you test? I think everybody should test, but we don't all have that much money in our pockets. Some people, it's a fun new thing to do. Their attention's being caught by the Ancestry ads, and they get that test for the person who's got everything. Why not? This is great, actually good for everybody, because the more people that test, the more powerful those databases become, and the more likely you are to find cousins from every branch of your family. The three major companies have combined probably more than 11 million people in their databases. Now, some people test in all of them. I'd like to know where they get the money from, Bob Bell.
It's real estate.
Real estate is really good, isn't it?
Sell newspapers on the corner.
He sells gadgets at the flea market.
He sells gadgets at the flea market, of course. That's where you make your money. Okay. So you can use DNA to solve some of your mysteries. It's very popular, of course, with adoption, people who are searching for their birth parents. They can shed light on that question. I'm not actually going to talk about how to do that. That's a whole lecture all on its own, and I'm not an expert at that field. But by comparing your DNA to a known cousin's DNA, and then comparing the two of you to someone else who comes up as a cousin, you can start fiddling around and finding out which branch of the family the new match is likely on. And then you can go searching in their tree and look for names that you recognize or places that you recognize. The amount of DNA you share is also a good pointer, because I don't know about you guys, but I've got about 2,000 matches. That's because I have Pennsylvania Quakers. And Ancestry's database is really heavy with US people. So I have a lot of matches. I don't look at them if it's beyond third cousin. You've gotta do the ones closest to you first. It's a really good way to validate that you really are searching the right family. I don't think I need to say anything else. If you match the cousins that you think you should match, based on your family trees, you've done a good job of your research. As we gain more and more experience with DNA, it's becoming a really good tool for genealogy. It's being used as evidence in proving linkages between generations. I am seeing more and more scholarly genealogy papers starting to use DNA as one of their proof arguments. Some people want to do genealogy for health history, but maybe they need a bigger tree, need to know more cousins, need to know more health history from the rest of their family to see if there is indeed a genetic disease that they have to worry about. There is one company that really tests for the health as well as the heritage, and that's 23andMe, and I'll get to that when I discuss the companies. A lot of people are really worried that their insurance company or their employers will get a hold of their DNA data and refuse them insurance based on genetic linkages to diseases. Well, both the US and Canada have passed legislation that the DNA results cannot be given to insurance companies or employers. It would actually take a court order for one of these companies to hand over your DNA data. Okay, so you've got some security there. Those companies are really interested in keeping your DNA private. So it's a good point to know about privacy on each site. And we are just beginning to tap into the information that DNA can give. And who knows what's coming down the pike in the future. I get asked a lot about, I've got a lock of hair from my great-grandfather. Can they do DNA on it? And by the way, the answer on that, currently no. But I'm looking forward to the day that maybe they can. Because I got a lock of hair of my father's when he was a baby. And he died before I got DNA from him. So, and he was the only male in the family too. He was his only child. His father had one brother who died childless. So when Dad died, I no longer get this brown DNA. And I need the DNA because of the last name being so common. So genetic genealogy is the DNA and the paper trail. So the DNA really isn't going to tell you your great-grandfather's name. That isn't how it works. It only tells you that you match this living person who's also in the database. And the two of you need to look into where on the tree that match could possibly happen. You need to figure it out. But at least that DNA will introduce you to a cousin that could be useful. Okay? So what does a DNA file look like? Well, considering the fact that they test 700,000 spots on your DNA, this is just a minuscule, tiny little portion of my DNA. Chromosome 1, position, and it tells you what base is at that position. And I'm not going into science here, okay? So, you match a cousin, you got enough DNA that that cousin's the first cousin. The DNA company says, now go away and figure it out, you guys. Okay? Let me tell you, if I ever came up with a half-brother from when my father was in England during World War II, I would be thrilled. Which brings up another point. When you do DNA, DNA doesn't lie. People lie. DNA does not lie. So you have to be prepared in case there's surprises. You may find out that your dad wasn't your biological dad. You may find out you've got half-siblings somewhere else in the world. You have to be prepared to accept that and work with it. Okay? Just a little warning. So, genetic genealogies, there's three main questions that people ask. What test should I take? What will I get from that test? And will it help me? So, what test should I take? But I can't answer that yet, because you've got to be told what tests there are. At the moment, there are three main kinds of DNA. There's actually a fourth kind, but it's not one you can actually request a test on. So the YDNA has been around quite a while. The Y chromosome is the chromosome that makes a man a man. They have an X chromosome from their mother and a Y chromosome from their dad. The mitochondrial DNA, that comes down the female line. The autosomal DNA, that's 22 pairs of the rest of the nucleus of the cell. And the X chromosome is the one that 2 X's makes a woman. Okay, that's your basic biology from high school, X and Y chromosomes, the sex chromosomes. Okay. So,
Do 3 X's make a superwoman?
actually 3 X's would probably be some sort of condition. But it'd be nice to think it'd make a superwoman, yeah. There actually are, I think it's an XXY, and it's a form of retardation. It's not a good idea to have 3 sex chromosomes in your cells, if you can avoid it. Okay. So, looking at the blue line, this is the line that goes across to the top of your chart. So, you're here, that's your dad, your grandfather, and your great-grandfather. The Y chromosome comes down unchanged, virtually unchanged, father to son, to son, to son, to son. Okay? There are some slight mutations over the centuries, but mostly unchanged. Only men can take this test, because women do not have a Y chromosome. All your matches are going to be along, descended from your strictly paternal line. So they will be cousins, probably with the same last name, because usually the surname goes along the paternal line as well. If not, there may have been an adoption in there, or there may have been a not parented expected event, like the postman rings twice or something along that line. Okay. So looking at the bottom line of your pedigree chart, the pink line, this is the strictly female line. Mom, grandma, great-grandma, but only the maternal ones. Now everyone can take this test because mom is really nice and gives her mitochondrial DNA to her sons as well. The sons just don't pass it down to any of their children. They'll have their mother's mitochondrial DNA. It's hard to work with. The surname changes with every generation as the women get married. And it mutates even more slowly than YDNA. So if you come up with some cousins on the mitochondrial DNA, you might match through your grandmother. You might match from your 50 times grandmother. Okay? Which is outside of paper trail, and there's no way you're ever going to figure it out. I consider it the least useful of the tests, but there are some very specific examples when it could be useful. And I'll give you one. This is the one that seems to be quoted all the time. You're descended from a fella, say your great-grandfather. He got married twice, and you don't know which mom you're descended from. So, and you're down the female line. Okay, so you yourself has the mitochondrial DNA of that wife. It's come down through her daughter to you. You need to find someone you know for sure came down from one of those wives in the maternal line, so they've got to come down again, daughter to daughter to daughter. It can be a son at your level, because remember, he gets it. But there can't be a male in the line anywhere except at the very end where you're testing. And if you match that person, you're down from that same wife. If you don't match that person, you're from the first wife. And heaven help you if there's 3 or 4 or 5 Ys, because you're going to have to do more tests. And
Now, if those two Ys were sisters, that probably would.
if those 2 Ys are sisters, just pick one, because genetically it's all the same. And you're right, if they were sisters, it'll be the same mitochondrial DNA. You won't be able to answer that. You're probably going to have to do something a little more creative with autosomal. Okay? You would have to pick something like that, Anne.
Sorry.
Okay. So going on to the autosomal DNA. And that's the one that is all of your lines. You have DNA from all of your lines in those 22 pairs of chromosomes. So here's a picture, a pretty picture. I don't think they're this color in real life, of the chromosomes. And what they do is they actually break up the cell. I have a cousin who's a geneticist, and they get the big, powerful microscope, and they actually sort them by size. You notice the chromosome 1 is quite long, and chromosome 22 is very small. That's why they sort them. They sort them by size. And if you look down here, so is this a male or a female? Because that's chromosome pair 23, that's your sex chromosomes. Is that a male or a female? Can you see it? It's too small. I'm sorry. Okay, they're the same length. So they're both X chromosomes. So that's 2 X's, a female. The Y chromosome is only half the length of an X chromosome. Just one of those little tidbits. So most of my lecture is going to be about autosomal DNA. So when you're working with autosomal DNA, you need a chart like this one. And it shows the different generational levels, which are important when you're trying to figure out amount of DNA that you share. It also shows how you're related. You're here in the orange box, so it shows how you're related to parents and grandparents, uncles and aunts, cousins, third cousin twice removed. Anything beyond that, probably there won't be enough DNA to be able to match to people that are your 5th cousins. Up in the corner of each of these boxes is the percentage of DNA that you share with these relatives. So when you think about it, you get half your DNA from your mom and half from your dad. So you share 50% with each of your parents. That means you don't get 50% of your parents' DNA. But your sibling might. Okay? So that's actually a good reason to test your siblings, because they may have DNA from a different line in the family that you didn't get any. And I've had this happen. I'll share that story with you when I actually make it to it in the slides. So, 50% with a parent, a sibling, or a child. 25% with a grandparent, grandchild, half sibling, uncle, aunt, niece, nephew, and double first cousins. Which my husband is a double first cousin, and I've had that proved out. His cousin actually tested, and I was able to look at the amount of DNA, and it fits right in there. 12.5% with great-grandparents and great-grandchildren, etc., etc. You can see that this is what we call kind of a shallow test, in that with each generation level that's removed away from you, up, down, sideways, it gets split in half. DNA comes unchanged. YDNA is unchanged. What you have, Steve, is the same as what your 5 times great-grandfather had. Unchanged. Same with mitochondrial. I have the same mitochondrial as my 5 times great-grandmother going up my mom's side of the family. Autosomal loses half of the DNA with every generation, every move. It sounds like I'm belaboring that, but it's important because you can't find out what your 10th cousins are. You won't have enough DNA to figure it out. So generally that means that you can't get past 4th or 5th cousins. If you had a really weird combination of DNA that you got maybe almost 80% of your mom's DNA, 80% of the grandmother's DNA that came down to your mom, which is only half of what the grandmother had, and you got that, you could match out to 6 cousins. But it also means there's a lot of DNA you didn't get from some other lines. Okay? This is what they say, that when you get cousins that are identified as 1st to 2nd cousins in the testing companies, that's usually greater than 95% of all your first cousins that are in the testing company will match you. That's virtually 100% actually. You get out to 3rd cousins. If you have 100 3rd cousins, you won't match 10 of them. But you still match 90% of them. But maybe your sister will match the other 10. Another reason to test your siblings. 4th cousins, still not bad, 50% of them. The big advantage there is you may only have, say, 5 first cousins, but you've probably got 150 4th and 5th cousins. So there's more of them, and you're more likely to see them in the testing database, as long as you match them. Okay. A lot of this has to do with randomness of how you inherit the DNA. Here's a little bit of science. When the cell is dividing to make an egg and a sperm, just before that happens, those chromosomes will kind of get close to each other and cross, and they're going to share and switch bits of DNA. And then it happens to the creation to make the egg and the sperm. Happens after that sharing happens. Well, if you got a little more of the arm it came down from your great-grandmother than your sister did, that's the randomness of the inheritance of the DNA. So, here's my little story. My 2 times great-grandmother, her name was Janet Waddell. She came from Uxbridge, Scotland. Well, I got an email from a Waddell cousin, still living in Scotland, and back and forth and back and forth. And we finally figured out, based on the amount of DNA and other cousins that this fella had matched, that we think my Janet was a sister to his great-great-grandmother. But here's the kicker. I didn't actually match him. It was my youngest sister and my mother that the match was found on. Not me or my youngest sister, my middle sister Sue. Another reason to test your siblings. And before you can decide what test you're going to take, you have to know what kind of sample you need to give. And a lot of people say, I hate needles. Needles are not involved anymore. It's a simple saliva test. It's either a swab, like a Q-tip, or you spit your saliva into a little tube. Now, if you're elderly and you can't spit as well as you used to, you may need to take the swab test. I had to use the swab test for my mother. Part of it was because she was 85 years old, and the other part was she had vascular dementia, and I had to keep telling her not to chew it. But I don't for a minute regret not having it, because if my cousins match me and my mom, I have half the lines to go investigating. It's really good to have that. Some companies, actually, I already said that. The swab test, as I said, is best for people with little saliva. Chemo treatments quite often will dry up the mouth. There's a lot of drugs out there that give you dry mouth. And people who can't comprehend, like dementia or mania, they'll need the swab test. It's a lot easier to administer that than try to get them to spit into a tube. So now, the next part is, what testing companies are there? Well, there's probably about 100 out there. But in the genealogy world, right now, there are 5. Many of those 100 companies have come and gone over the years. Sorensen Molecular Foundation, the National Geographic one's gone too. Many of them have gone. And I know there's DNA companies here in Toronto, there's one north of Toronto, but they don't have databases for match comparisons. So,
Nancy, when a company goes, like I was tested almost for free by Sorensen years ago, where is my data?
I don't know, and if you ever find the answer, I'd like to know too, because I've got a test in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to redo it.
Okay.
Okay? I believe the National Geographic can be reached through Family Tree DNA, because I think the testing was done at their lab.
Yes.
But I really don't know where Sorensen Molecular Foundation went to. There was another one I took a test with, can't remember the name now, but it's long gone as well. Okay, so here are the testing companies. I'm going to talk about each one in turn. There are 4 really good ones, and there's one that's emerging in the field, one from Britain, and I'll talk about that one too. And this is in alphabetical order. Okay? This is the one that will give you your medical risk assessment as well as your heritage. It is a spit in the tube one. It's it only does autosomal DNA. It doesn't do any of the other tests. They have 2 types on sale. So there's the full test that gives you the health markers $249. And this is Canadian. If it's US, I'll say so. If you only want ancestry information and matching your cousins, it's $129. But you only pay the one cost. You don't have to have a subscription. And they say that they've got over 3 million people in their database. Many, though, who have tested for health will not answer you if you send them an email through the company. You can't get their email directly. Now, they have a Valentine's Day sale. So if you want this company, you can get the full test for $199 and the Ancestry test for $103 till Valentine's Day. They also give you your Neanderthal percentage. And they do have what's called a chromosome browser, which is a tool that's very popular with a lot of genealogists. There's a lot of people try and map where on their chromosomes people match and which ancestor that DNA probably came from. And then they go out and if they have a new unknown, they look at where they match and try and see if it's from a certain ancestor. It's a little geeky. But it's also fun to look at the chromosome browser. Ancestry DNA, well, who can forget that lovely commercial, the fellow in the lederhosen who had to switch to the Scottish kilt and the bagpipes? Well, or was it the other way around? I can't remember. Well, it's really worked for them because they have over 7 million testers. And this time last year, I think they only had about 4 million. They are growing by leaps and bounds. They went from 3 million to 6 million in 8 months. And that was just about the American Thanksgiving. Well, imagine what the Christmas sales season has done. Last I've heard is 7.7 million, but I've only heard it from one person, so I fudged a little bit here and said over 7 million. Unfortunately, well, it's fortunate because then you got more people to test. Unfortunately, some of those people don't realize there's 2 parts to what you get. And all they're interested in is the ethnicity map. And they don't even realize they've got matches they can go look at. But we have to educate them about that. Now, Ancestry is a subscription website. You can have your test in there for free, and you will be able to see your ethnicity estimate, something that Ancestry calls genetic communities. You can see your match list. You can contact them. You will see the predicted relationship, and you will see the shared matches feature. What you won't get is the matches public trees, the list of their surnames. You won't get any ancestor hints, which is Ancestry comparing your 2 trees. You won't get into DNA circles, and you won't see any new ancestor discoveries. So when you're a subscriber, you really get a lot more features. Now, Ancestry does not have a chromosome browser, which really ticks off a lot of the geeky people. I have a subscription. I have done an Ancestry test, and I really do think if you're going to concentrate on your DNA, it's worth maybe getting a 3-month or a 6-month subscription just to work on it and see if you can match people. And then you send a message, and the message goes through Ancestry. Again, you cannot see their email. But if they answer back, you can ask for their email address and take it offline.
If you tie in somebody else's DNA, like a spouse, if they don't have a subscription that you have and you manage theirs.
I believe you can do the full stuff,
Okay.
but don't quote me.
Okay.
Okay.
I got my kids all underneath. Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Experience. It is really nice to get those record hints when you have a full subscription. Moving on, family tree DNA. Now this is one that's well respected in genealogical circles, and I don't think I've ever seen them do an advertisement on TV. It is a cheek swab, so this is the one that I chose for my mother. They do all 3 tests: autosomal, YDNA, and mitochondrial. And those are the prices. It used to be $99 US for a family finder. They brought it down to $79 and it's been there pretty steadily for about a year. 8 months to a year, I'd say. And that's not on sale. That's their regular price now. YDNA, you notice it says 37 markers. That's because they test the YDNA at 37 points. You can get 67 and you can get 111 marker tests as well at correspondingly higher prices. And you can also get something called Big Y, and not having a Y, I don't care. Even if you got it, Bob. Bob has shown us of his Big Y test at our DNA special interest group, so I have to
Zero
tease
matches.
him. Yeah, I have to tease him about it. Now, Family Tree DNA is just the cost of the test. You don't have to subscribe to the website. You can access it permanently going on forward for as long as they survive. They were started by a genealogist. That company was started by a genealogist, so I think it's going to be around for quite a while, because it's been around for 12 or 14 years now, I believe. They're really nice because they let you import your data from other companies. You can do it for free. And if you pay $19, you can unlock some extra tools like a chromosome browser. And you see a little more information about your matches. And I unlocked it when it was $49, of course. This is the one that's emerging from Britain. Living DNA. It's a cheek swab as well. And you get all the tests. You have no choice. You can't just pick autosomal. You get all the tests. All three if you're a male, and if you're a female, of course, you only get mitochondrial and autosomal. It's $199, but right now, their website says $169, limited time offer. They don't say what that means. And if you're an OGS member, you go on your, what's it called? Well, it used to be called Members Only. It's called Members Corner or something like that now, something fancy. And you can get a discount code and get it for $149 Canadian. For 2 or 3 tests, that's pretty darn good. Their thing right now is the ethnicity estimates, especially in the British Isles. They have the most advanced DNA test and reference samples that they can break down England, Ireland, and I think Scotland will be coming at some point. I think right now it's just Lowland and Highland breakdown for Scotland. Almost to the county level, which no other company will do. So if you have deep British Isles roots, it can be and you're stuck, it can be very handy to go and see where it says you got DNA from. Southwest, Southeast, Midlands, that sort of thing can be very handy. Ireland, I haven't actually had a good look at mine yet. I get a feeling most of mine are up in Ulster, because a lot of the DNA that's come back seems to be Scottish. They have ongoing studies that they are trying to break countries down into smaller bits, so you have a chance of working on records in that area. They don't do matches yet. I've heard via the rumor mill they're thinking August of this year that you would get a match list. It's going to take them a while, but right now they're actually soliciting people to put up their raw DNA. for free. So if you've got your DNA at a company and you've downloaded your raw DNA, put it up on Living DNA, because I'm fairly impressed with what they've done so far. They seem to be a little more academically based, so they're using these population studies to parse out the DNA a little bit more finely. And
If they're going into population studies, do they have anything about the Neanderthal DNA?
haven't noticed it there. We'll find out. You can always take your DNA up to GenMatch. They have a Neanderthal finder as well. Okay? I'm not going to talk about GenMatch. It's a third-party website that you can upload your DNA to and see your matches from other companies. It's people who've put their fish into a big common pond. Okay. MyHeritage is another contender. They've got over 1 million people, but they started a lot later than the other ones. It's a cheek swab as well. They only do the autosomal. Right now, it's up on the website. It has been for quite a while for $69 US, plus shipping. Everything's plus shipping. But to get all the tools, you have to belong to their website. And it's can be a little pricey, like Ancestry. Their strength is in the diversity of their database. They've got a lot of European samples. So for instance, if you're German lines or if you've got Eastern European, that may be the one you want to put your test into. You can upload your raw data for free. They'll take it. And just recently they've improved their search algorithms, and so your matches are supposed to be more appropriate than they have been. And they just introduced a chromosome browser as well. So those are the testing companies. So let's see what you get when you actually test. Well, if you test YDNA, okay, ladies, you have to convince a guy to test for you if you want YDNA data. A brother, a father, an uncle, not a son, because that only gets your husband's YDNA.
What about first cousin?
First cousin, if it's a same surname, that would do it. Okay? By same surname, I mean it's come down through the father, from the common great-grandfather. Yeah, okay. You're good. I already mentioned that there are 3 different levels of tests. There used to be a 25 marker test, and nobody does that one anymore. 37 marker to start, and of course you're going to do it at Family Tree DNA. In a year I may say, and Living DNA, but right now they don't do the matches. You can upgrade, they keep the samples. Family Tree DNA keeps your samples because you actually end up sending in 2 swabs and they keep one on file. So you can always upgrade your test later when you've got a little more money. Okay, so you get a match list. You get a haplogroup, which is a letter and number representation of where your migration path came. I think is the easiest way to say it, which also ties into the migration map that you get. This is what a match list will look like, and I've tried to X out people's real names. This is my husband's. That was his Christmas present to me last year. He asked, and I told him, that's what I wanted. So my last name is Trimble. If you look here, you'll see I've got a Turnbull, and a Trimble, matching my husband at 67 markers, which is, I picked the middle test for him. Not super expensive and not cheapy. Okay. Out here on this side, all three of these people have a genetic distance of 1. That means that there is 1 mutation different. So 1 marker has changed by 1 number compared to my husband. Now his family came from Ireland. Turnbull sounds Scottish. So maybe the Turnbulls were involved in the Ulster plantation and the Trimbles corrupted the name a little bit along the way. Maybe I need to be searching Trimbles in Scotland and Northern England. Who knows? His haplogroup is RM269, which is part of a group called R1b, and that's the most common YDNA in Western Europe. So that doesn't help me much. Except if you look at this fella here, whose haplogroup is RL21, I'm thinking he's not somebody I'm going to investigate right away. I'm going to be investigating the other 2 fellows who have the same haplogroup. That's if I get around to doing it. Steve?
Could it be that he's just paid for extra research that our L21 is further down the line?
It's possible. I don't know. You know more about... Steve manages a Y group.
I wouldn't give up on it. It could be he spent extra money and
had further markers.
And he's investigating stuff like that.
Not my area of expertise. Yours more than mine. Steve is co-chair of the DNA Special Interest Group, so if you're ever interested in coming out and listening to us blab on, show videos, and answer questions, you're more than welcome. I'll put a plug in right now. It's the 3rd Wednesday of the month at our office, while we still have one. And we start at 7 p.m. So you can get the map to the office off of our website. So here's the migration map for the R group. As you can see, it came out of Africa. That was where our progenitor Adam was, down here, this blue fella. But once it hit out here, it started going off. As you can see, it's one of the more popular ones for Western Europe. Mitochondrial DNA, you get a match list, a haplogroup, and know the 2 sets of haplogroups are not the same. They are totally different. They look the same, but they are different. With mitochondrial, because it doesn't mutate very often, you want a genetic distance of 0. Ignore everybody else, because the change is probably thousands of years back. You email them and you compare your maternal lines only. Best case scenario, you find a match, and the worst case, you find thousands of matches, and you may as well give up. So with mitochondrial DNA, you pay more than some of the other tests, and you often get less. And
Is it good for like eliminating lines, or if you can't pinpoint because there's too many, could you at least say, well, that's not even close, so?
well, I would think that anybody that doesn't have the same haplogroup as you would probably not show up with a genetic distance of 0.
So then you could eliminate lots of people who didn't.
Oh, yeah. You probably would not get very many people to actually match against. And there's a lot of people who don't understand it. You know, they give you their line and there's a man in the middle of it. Well, no, not possible for the mitochondrial. Okay, the haplogroup actually describes the very deep maternal ancestry. It's often not helpful except for very specific questions. My living DNA mitochondrial haplogroup is H1. That's not the haplogroup I got back when Ancestry did mitochondrial DNA. Who knows? Maybe I swabbed the wrong part of my cheek.
Check here.
So at any rate, here's the mitochondrial Eve. And these are L, which I understand is mostly African. N looks to be Middle East. R comes around into Greece and Italy and down into India. Those lines are very faint on mine. Yeah, okay, let me do this. This is Europe. This is the British Isles. This is Africa, if that gives you a little bit of grounding. And the H's are over in here and up into Scandinavia too. Too common. But if you get an uncommon one, it can tell you a lot. The list of matches I can't show you because I haven't actually done the mitochondrial test, the full test. So I can't show you that. Autosomal DNA, you get a list of matches and you get that lovely ethnicity map. It's, as I said, a shallow test, good for 5 or 6 generations. I'll tell you right now, it took me about 4 lectures on autosomal DNA to start getting a good grounding. So don't feel bad if it doesn't quite click yet. Just keep going to lectures until you do grasp it. This is the one that's going to connect you to your living cousins. At least we're going to hope they're living by the time you get to them. This is what a match list looks like. Okay, I don't know if you can see that very clearly. The very top person I match is Alice Brown, who is my mother. And I know she's my mother. But we share 3,384 centimorgans of DNA. Now, what's a centimorgan? The easiest way to think of it is that it's a distance. It's a quantity of a length in the DNA. There is some explanation that's really convoluted, and I'm not going to give it to you. Just think of it as distance. So the more, the better, the closer the person is to you. Okay? This is at Family Tree DNA because, of course, that's where I tested my mom, and I uploaded my raw data from Ancestry. The next person down is Allison Brown. That's my sister, the youngest one, the one with the Waddell DNA that I didn't get. And the next one down, Susan McLennan, my middle sister. Fourth one down is David. David, when I saw his name, I went, oh, because I knew him. He's my second cousin. And second cousins are golden because they can really help you pin people down to a certain part of your tree. If somebody matches him and me, they're on the Wilkins line of the family. That's called triangulation. Okay? And that's a bit of what you do. The next lecture would be how to actually use the autosomal DNA, but here's a taste of what it looks like. Let me just show you one thing right here. There's a little blue envelope If you click on that, you can see the person's actual email address. You're not going through the company. Okay? Another thing I like about Family Tree DNA. Because if you go through the company, you have no assurance that person has ever received or looked at the emails. So this pops up automatically, it's all filled out, and I just have to start typing. And I'm going to give you some hints on that at the end. 4 main companies have a way to send email. 3 are internal, 23andMe, Ancestry, MyHeritage. And the Family Tree DNA is the actual email. If you upload to the third-party site that has they don't do the testing, they just crunch the numbers, they give you the real email address as well of your matches. Okay. There's a place on all the platforms to enter a pedigree chart. You can upload something called a GenCom, which is a communication standard that all family tree programs can read, and all family tree programs can export your data in a GenCom file. Okay? Use that tree to check for ancestral surnames and ancestral places, because you never know, there might have been an NPE, a not parent expected event. This is the ethnicity map that you get of Family Tree DNA. And you can see there that lovely blue stands for British Isles. They don't break it down any further. It's British Isles. Well, thank you very much, I knew that. Okay. Now I got a little bit of Eastern Europe. It's way back. I don't have a clue on that one. 12% though. That's almost at the great-grandparent level, and as far as I'm aware, they were all British. So
Could it be like 2% on this line and 2% on that?
it could be. I'm guessing that's probably what it is. So the maps are estimates. Keep that in mind. I quite often call them a coffee table book. They're fun to discuss, but take it with a pinch of salt. When they are really useful is when it shows up Jewish, African, Native American DNA. Then you know you've got something to go really hunting in your line for. But if you're basically 100% British Isles or 100% European, it really doesn't tell you too much more than your paper trail told you. Every company has their own private, patented reference samples that they compare your DNA to. So your map may look a little different from company to company to company. And that's because they've just used different references to compare you against. Every year they seem to be getting better. Every so often you'll go back and your map will have changed a little bit, and that's because they've refined their samples further. Ancestry treats things in a different way. So here's the match list of Ancestry. Most of the people seem to be using initials. So when you click on one of those people, and this is my best match in Ancestry, it's a third cousin. And when I click on that, actually I think I'm clicking on the gentleman down here. So when I click on RA, which is administered by Radical 35, which helps you a lot in trying to assign your family tree names. see down here, he has a tree, I have a tree, and Ancestry has gone through and picked out some names that are in common. So he has the Brown name. No surprise there, it's not going to tell me anything, just as Smith and Johnson won't. But Carr and Roberts, well, Roberts is almost as bad, but Carr could be very interesting. They also have the ethnicity map. It's basically the same as what I had on Family Tree DNA. And keep in mind, this is exactly the same raw data. I didn't take another test at Family Tree DNA. This is just how the two companies handle the same numbers. I seem to have more Spain and Portugal, which I'm assuming might be one of those sailors that got dumped in the Irish Sea during the Armada. Possibly. I also have quite a bit of Scandinavian, and I'm assuming that's the Vikings that invaded Yorkshire and Dublin. They also have something called genetic communities where they've mapped out, they've actually crunched a lot of data and found people who they feel belong in this, in different genetic communities that they've had identified. And this one has to be the Scots in central Scotland and Ulster, Ireland. And you can see where they've got a map showing southern Scotland, northern England, and Ulster, the top northeast of Ireland. They give you a history down the side, and as you go scrolling down, it gives you certain different eras. So it's very interesting to read. So, living DNA. This is the one that has the smaller population localities. This one, this is actually from a brand new publication that came out from Moorehead magazines on DNA. DNA Tracing Your Ancestors and Your Genealogy. It's a very good read. I really recommend that one. This map is actually taken from their publicity tools on their website, actually from the book. And it shows the new clusters that they're showing in Ireland. I don't know if that's too much of a blur, but you can see the different colors and how they've really split the DNA down into specific sub-areas of Great Britain. And I think this is going to be a fairly good site once they get the match list going. There's a fellow named Blaine Bettinger who is the genetic genealogist, and that's his website, thegeneticgenealogist.com. He does a survey yearly and asks people to upload statistics on specific proved relationships, and then he takes that and puts it in that chart, gives you the relationship, the average amount of DNA that these hundreds or thousands of people have shared, and then the range of centimorgans that that particular relationship falls in. So this is a very useful chart to have. All you have to do is Google shared centimorgan C capital M project, and it will come up. The companies assign relationships, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they aren't. Here's that cousin of my husband's, that double first cousin. He's the top line, and it comes up and says that he and my husband are half siblings. But if you actually go and look at the percentages, double first cousins have the same amount of DNA as half siblings. So it's up to you and your match to figure out what the real relationship is. Companies have a suggestion, but they don't list all the possible relationships. So that's something to watch for. So, will it help? Well, YDNA gets 5 stars. Because if you get a match on YDNA, it's pretty solid. Especially if there's only a genetic distance of 0 or 1. Autosomal DNA, 4 stars, but you got a lot of work to do. And you got to crunch numbers. And you got to try and fit those numbers into relationship categories. So, 4 stars. It's the most common one being taken nowadays, though. Mitochondrial DNA, 3 stars. If you only have a specific question and only an unbroken female line will tell you the answer, and you can find that other person with the unbroken female line, go for it. But I hold off on that one. That would not be the first one I got. So, are you all befuddled? Can you answer what test should I take? Because everybody has their own answer. Okay. So, here's a piece of advice. Always start your testing with a question. Then figure out which test would help you answer that question and who you have to find to test. Or, if you're just generally interested and you're going to throw your DNA into the pond and see what you catch, here's the strategy. Test at Ancestry, because they got the biggest pond. Upload to Family Tree DNA, second biggest pond. Upload to MyHeritage, European pond. Living DNA, British Isles pond, and a match list coming. And then also use the third-party tool called GenMatch. You could do another test at 23andMe if you want. I haven't heard of a lot of people who found that useful, in spite of their advertising how many people have met through 23andMe. I haven't spent my money there. I can't really show you anything from that site. But I think you'll get enough matches with those 5 places that it's worth your money. If you're going to do a surname study, then you have to get YDNA for that surname. And Family Tree DNA is the only place, just as it's the only place for mitochondrial. And then you go looking for a surname group, which Family Tree DNA hosts. Steve does the Van Norman
And various spellings.
and various spellings. Well, the Trimble one ended up in the Turnbull project. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to just give you a yes.
Can you upload your DNA data, raw data, to go into, if you don't have membership, to go into the other ones that you mentioned?
Yes. There's 2 that will not accept raw data, and that's Ancestry and 23andMe.
Okay, so as you said, if you have Ancestry,
If you have Ancestry, you can download your raw data from there, and they will fit in
family,
Family Tree DNA, MyHeritage, living DNA, and that's new, fairly new, living DNA accepting raw data, and GEDmatch.
And you do that without being, having a membership.
That's correct. When I talked about Ancestry, I told you the features you got without a membership and with a membership. 23andMe, I don't have experience. Well, actually, no, you're downloading from Ancestry. So family tree DNA, you get better information by unlocking it. It's only $19 US. It's well worth the money. MyHeritage, you can't see record matches, but I believe you can see your matches. I think you can communicate with them, but I don't think you can see their family trees.
Sounds like eHarmony.
Yes, eHarmony, yeah. And of course, living DNA, we're still waiting to see the matches. GEDmatch, you see your top 1,000 matches. I believe it's what they capped at 1,000, which gives you lots of work. So, oops, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because I'm talking too much. Your profile on your different sites, stick in a photo, say what country you're in, and put in your age range. Why put in your age range? So people know whether or not you're on the same generation level as them. And it helps them pick out the amount of DNA according to levels and not getting fooled by once removed, etc. Put out your family tree, even if it's only basic. Do the 6 generations. Make sure you've got dates and places. Very important. Keep checking your matches. Don't look once and say, oh, there's nothing there, and leave it for 2 years. The match might show up in an hour. Contact only your best matches. Spend your time on them first. And as I said, second cousins are golden. Always check your messages and respond, even if all you say is, I don't have any information to give you, or, sorry, my dad just died, I'll have to wait till after the funeral, but I did get your message. And even if they say you're out there a half-sibling, you say, okay, I need some time to process this, I'll get back to you, okay? Or, I've got to consult the family, something along that line. Be frank with them. Maybe you're too busy, or maybe you're not researching that line right now. Or maybe all the stuff you have on the Goulds are packed in boxes down in your storage unit in your condo, like me. Explore your tools, and each one of those websites has something called a shared match, or an in common with tool, or relatives in common, some sort of way to pick the people that match you and one other person. Use that to the max. Test in more than one database. I think you got that out of the rest of the lecture. And share your results with your family. Get them interested. Maybe they'll pay for their DNA test. Hey, I've got 11 of them on the go, and I think I've paid for 9 of them. I don't do, I do about 3 a year. Okay, that first contact email is really, really, really important. So your subject line has to be really good. You have to personalize it so it doesn't sound like you're getting a contact form letter. I don't know about you, but I'm not answering something that says, oh, you match my mother, you and 50,000 other people. So a subject line could be something like autosomal DNA found on Ancestry of AT, the initials. Don't use a canned response. Introduce yourself. My name is Nancy. I'm interested in my family history. I see that we are possibly third cousins. I've looked at your family tree. I see a name of Craig. I do have some Craigs married into my family. And then you ask one simple question. Maybe it's, can you look at my family tree and do you recognize any of the names? Don't give them the whole history. They won't read more than one paragraph. Here's one. This person has actually taken the trouble to check the in common with matches, has identified other people that seem to indicate the person's on the Vinoy line. And she's actually sent an attachment that that person can print and think about. You could also mention one or two possible ancestral couples or places that may fit into their tree. So, and see how she ended that. I am excited to see if we can make a family connection. I look forward to hearing from you. So that email can be very, very important. That last bit was pretty quick. I'm sorry. I could have said a lot more, but I'm sure you want to get to a break. At this point, do you have any questions?
I'd like to just make a comment.
Okay.
What we should do if you're going to do the autosomal DNA is to pick your oldest relative first, or especially if you're a generation earlier than you. So if you're one or either, or you're both, if the parents are still alive, do them. Because once they're gone, you've lost at least 50% of their DNA.
Yes, think about it. Your mother has 100% of her DNA, and you only got 50%. She's going to match more strongly with another person than you will. So when I did the Gould family line, we happened to know a cousin who was down from the youngest son, and the youngest son, the youngest son, about 3 generations of youngest sons. And my line comes down from the oldest sons to my grandmother. He's 2 generations back from my mother. He's at the level, generation-wise, of my grandfather. No, my great-grandfather. So he's got a lot more Gould DNA than I do. So, as well as Gould YDNA, I did his YDNA too. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, what was the way, if you go with your parents' last name, how do you know the name?
Do you have a family tree that you know the biological parents?
For example, I'm paper, but my book.
Okay. That makes it very difficult. There are Facebook groups for adoption that have a lot of discussion on different techniques on how to try and figure out. You look at your matches and you look at their trees. You look at how much DNA and what's the most likely relationship. First cousin, second cousin, third cousin. If it's a first cousin, then one of the sets of grandparents is your target. If it's a second cousin, then it's great-grandparents. That's going to be a target. So that's how you work it. But I'm not an expert on adoption. I need the person's tree for me to figure things out. But there are experts out there, and there are people you can hire who will go over the DNA for you. Well, if you're not adopted, why would they be a different name? Okay? So that's sort of a informal adoption, really. Yeah. That makes it difficult. Yeah. You treat it like an adoption, a closed adoption, where you don't know the names. And you would have to, there are Facebook groups that help you work through that. So that might be one where you actually take your DNA and your matches to somebody who does that for a living. Okay.
You might come across a similar problem if you have ancestors in a country where they don't use surnames.
Yeah, the patronymic countries like Scandinavia.
Yes, or other types of naming patterns where they don't use surnames necessarily.
Well, if there's a certain naming pattern, that will guide you. If they use patronymics, most of those countries have very good records. I don't have experience in patronymic countries, but it would be again a matter of comparing trees. Okay, so you could see Nils Johnson or Johnson, and it shows up on someone else's tree and the place, because usually the farm name in the Scandinavian countries are very important when finding records. Okay. Anyone else have a burning question?
So my parents are not living, so if I go to his brother's son, I should be able to get it back, right?
On YDNA, yes. If you're doing autosomal, you can do it yourself.
What if I did one of my mother's sisters?
That'd be even better, but would only tell you your maternal line. Wouldn't tell your dad's.
Yes. Okay, but my mother's, I could do my, yeah, okay. What about?
Uncles would be very important.
Uncles,
Uncle would be important.
Very important.
very, yeah. At accuracy, test the oldest generation first. If you've got parents, grandparents, uncles, and aunts still living, get them. I just did one of the very last aunt that my husband has alive. I got her at Christmas. But that whole generation for me and my husband is gone. She's the very last.
Do as many as you can to get forward.
Yeah.
Or marry.
Well, this is it. If you've got an uncle on your father's side and an aunt on your mother's side, do them both.
Aunts and uncles are on my mother's side.
Yeah.
Uncle on my father's side.
Yeah.
Your cousin on your father's side would give you additional DNA from your father's side.
Yeah. And remember I said do siblings, because each one of the children inherits a different 50%. The only ones that inherit exactly the same 50% are identical twins. Yes? They don't have records. DNA is not a record. Well, you can find some church records that go back to, in Ontario, back to the early 1800s, you can find some. Government records for birth, marriage, and death, 1869, if they bothered to register the kids. The land records can go quite far back, 1795 for this area, Steve was saying, and in the land records you'll get some names and some wives' names, and some heirs, something wills are actually in the land records. Wills go back to probably about the same time period, if they bothered to do a will. So the records are all over the place. And the best book I know for Ontario is Brenda Merriman's book, Ontario Searching the Records, is it called? Something along that line. And you buy it from Ontario Genealogical Society. Or get it at the library. Just about all the libraries have a copy. Okay? And that will tell you where all the different records are.
So how do you get tests? Do you have to go to like Ancestry and buy it, they send it to you?
Yep. Actually, Amazon is selling some of the tests too. At least in the States. I'm not so sure about Amazon.ca. Just, there's one to really avoid. There's one called DNA by Ancestry, and that's not Ancestry's test. It's some almost fly-by-night company, and they don't give you any match list. And their ethnicity map is not very accurate, I've heard. So that's one to avoid. Stick with one of those 5 companies. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'll have a break now.
I'm only going to take a second here. If anybody has their calendar in their pocket, please mark March the 4th if you have Cornish ancestry. We are having the first annual Cornish Heritage Day in Clarington. It will be held at the Sarah Jane Williams Heritage Center, aka the museum, from 2 till 3:30. So mark your calendars for March the 4th if you've got Cornish in your family. Ray over here, you're Cornish, you know. Yeah. I expect to see you there. We're going to have pasties.
Okay, I'll try to make this brief. I timed myself today. Is that working? Okay, thank you. I timed myself today. It took about 10 minutes.
Okay, we'd like to get started now. Karen is going to show a little bit of applied DNA.
So you'll see the title is How DNA Expanded My Family. This could take 15 to 20 minutes, but I'm going to reduce how much I'm covering because I don't want to hold you up there long tonight. When you see the title, How DNA Expanded My Family, specifically, it's a case of a DNA match assisted me in breaking down the brick wall, which was my great-grandmother, Elizabeth Miller, and not really knowing anything about her. My mother was 20 months old when she lost both her parents, and she was then adopted by a family in Canada, so we really didn't know very much about the maternal side. But we did get a document from one of her biological sister's children, and this is the document which basically told us a little bit about Elizabeth Miller. It's very old, and it didn't say a lot, so we really started out with minimal information on Elizabeth Miller. And of course, the problem is the name Miller. Is it an AR or an ER? You know, the whole thing is just like a Smith, right? So I'm going to read to you just very briefly what we had to work with. Basically, it mentioned that her grandfather was William Morris, my mother's grandfather was William Morris, who married Elizabeth Miller. And Elizabeth's parents owned and operated a saloon in Perth, Ontario, which is near Ottawa, as you probably know. Elizabeth's father died in a drowning accident, and her mother remarried a man who did not want the 3 children. Elizabeth and her brother and sister were raised by my grandmother. Which one? Miller, they think. Well, I think they probably, after a number of years of doing research, realized that family narratives really don't tell you the exact truth, right? Because of the number of generations that the storyline is adopted by. Pardon? It varies. It varies. So obviously this was quite accurate. They didn't marry or meet in Perth at all. So what happened? My sister and I spent 10 years looking for Elizabeth Miller records. There's none. There's none. There's no baptismal record. And there was really nothing about her parents that we could find. What happened, a cousin on my mother's, a cousin by the name of Morris, the man Elizabeth married William Morris, a Morris cousin, advised us to start looking at Snow Road, which is a little hamlet northwest of Perth. And it's about 20 minutes from there by car. And that Snow Road was very important to the Millers. So we found Elizabeth Miller and her husband, William Morris. We found a marriage record. Let me see, I'm just going to try and see if I can. First of all, there's a picture of her I'm talking about. You'll see with the picture facing you on the left bottom is the William Morris, my great-grandmother, and on the right, two older, of course, is the elder baby, Elizabeth Miller. That's my great-grandmother. And the top behind me, William Morris, is William John, who's my grandfather, my mother's father. So when we found this record, can you see it here? It shows Elizabeth Miller, born in Palmerston, which is the township that Snow Road is located in. The parents were John and Janet Miller. Well, there's no John and Janet Miller, but you can see after 10 years, I spent 6 months reading every newspaper article on Millers. I never found John or Janet Miller. I spent the whole 6 months working there, and I just said, I'm going to find them, and I found them. And we covered the whole area. My sister and I both have been looking, like I said, for 10 years. So we really don't know who the parents were. Then what happened, because Snow Road was mentioned to us, I started going through the census for Ontario, hoping to find any. I don't know if you can see this, but if you, this is the census for 1871 for Snow Road. And if you drop down, see John McDonald was the first person with the family, then James Miller, and then further down you'll see a Robert Miller, Elizabeth, John William, and Alexander Elizabeth and Hannah. So that's the first indication that she existed, or she lived in Snow Road. But we didn't know whether Alexander was her brother, but we knew about Hannah. But that's the only information we have. And we see the Robert Miller and Elizabeth Miller, the parents that raised them. Robert Miller, I've been in touch with the descendants of both Robert and Elizabeth, and no one knows of it. They still don't know anything about my great-grandmother Elizabeth, even though she lived there. So we decided the only way to handle this was to go to Snow Road lesson, which we did do. And 3 years prior, I was speaking to a lady by the name of Miller that grew up on Snow Road, had her parents own a general store, and she got married there. Lovely lady, and she said, if you're coming here, I'll show you around to Snow Road, which was ideal because it's the back roads, like it's just this little tiny hamlet you wouldn't find yourself. Her last name was Miller, but we thought we weren't related. Anyway, 3 weeks prior to the trip, I was going through family tree DNA. And at that point, my sister and I had concluded that Elizabeth, Hannah, and Alexander were strays, because this lady, Elizabeth Miller, that raised her, that's listed in the 1871 census, she was known well. Everyone knows about Elizabeth Smith Miller down in the Perth area. She, her actual name, she went by Elizabeth Granny Smith, because she was the doctor, nurse, she was everything from the late 1800s to everyone. And so she was always taking in children and raising them, and we thought, okay, so we're never going to know anything about our Elizabeth because we don't even know her real last name. Well, then, 3 weeks prior to the trip, I went to Family Tree DNA, and I thought, I'm going to give it one more try before we go. And I entered Miller with an AR. And up popped this name of this person who was my third cousin, and he's a Miller. Well, I got very excited for my sister, and we started looking into it. And what you'll see, I deleted his name for privacy reasons. So on the left side, when you're looking at it, you'll see January 31st. Second, fourth cousin, and you'll see the shared centimorgans. And as Nancy said, the greater centimorgan, the more chance there is of you being related. Well, 61 is fairly high for me, and my sister had almost 100 with the same person. So we knew we were related, and actually the chart, which I actually did produce the chart from Family Tree, which shows all the chromosomes and the matches. It shows that at the top right, which I had to delete his name again, but it showed that we're third cousins, so I contacted him. He's living in Saskatchewan, he's 90 years old. And his daughter responded and said, yes, he grew up in Snow Road too. Well, this is the first indication that my Elizabeth was related to these Millers. Everyone down there says, we don't know who you are. They just took on that name. But in fact, we're related. Not only that, I'll go back to this page. If you drop down beyond the fourth, you'll see that there's another person with the initials R.M. And that person is a descendant of Alexander and James Miller, the brother. And the three of us are related. So she's fourth cousin. So this man out of Saskatchewan, it made sense because Elizabeth Granny Smith Miller, that raised my great-grandmother, she had a son, William, who was the witness to my great-grandmother's marriage. And William had a son who was Delbert. When Delbert moved out to BC, became a doctor, or to Saskatchewan, became a doctor. And this 9-year-old man's his son. So now it all started coming together. That's the point we're at, which tells me that this is the third brick wall that I've been dealing with as a result of DNA matches. And frankly, I wouldn't know this information, and the other two are similar. It's just quite shocking. You go for so long, 10 years, and then suddenly one line in a website tells you that something's happening, and you start looking at it further and realize that they give you an answer to something that you thought you'd never find out. So, you'll see this. Yeah, that's what they lived in. This is shocking. I took that picture. I still can't get over it. I even bent down and opened the door. It's tiny. In 1871, that's what they were living in, on the farm. Yeah. See the chimney? Well, they haven't torn it down, thank goodness. So we got there in time that before it was torn down. I mean, it's just shocking. And that's the silo that's beside the cabin, you want to call it, or whatever, what color that's the silo. Now, Granny Smith was notorious for being able to look after everyone, including her own family. So her sons, there was 3 or 4 of them, they built the Snow Road Hotel. And I think they built it with the assistance of my great-grandfather before they went out west, okay? Well, I was very proud of this when I saw this picture of the community center. The building has been torn down, but I was very proud of the fact, I think, that they were able to build this. Until I found out that it was a bordello. That's what we're used. I'm shocked. I just looked at each other. This little old lady, I'm going to show you a picture here, I can't believe it. Anyway, something's not there. This is the root cellar that she used to store her vegetables for when the people, the men and women, whatever, stayed in the hotel. Okay? This is the Let Pharmacy built in 1883. Well, that's just about just across the way is the cabin that I just showed you a picture of with the silo. Okay, so it's still there. This is the land that my great-grandmother lived on. You'll see the house. So the Let farm, the granddaughter lives there now. She's the Let. But the only 2 owners have been the Millers and the Lets. So we went in and had a great visit, and that's when she came up with that word bordello. And she knew more than we did, so it was very useful to us, right? But you'll see, it's a very large building, but the left side of the pointed roof, that was the only part, that was what they had at the time, which is still a lot better than the cabin, right? But she was telling us that Granny Smith didn't get along with her younger son, William, the one I mentioned that was a witness to the marriage. So when you walk in, they have rooms on the left, you have a long, wide hallway, and then living room and kitchen, whatever. Well, they didn't talk. So Granny Smith had her Granny Smith, and she said that's where the term came from Canada, Granny Smith, from the 700. I don't know if that's true, I think they want to think it is. But anyway, that's how they lived. And then they built on later, built the additional area later. This is the lady that had a bordello. Look at her. Elizabeth Grandison, I still can't get over it. Anyway, she was married 4 times. Yes, 4 times. She was born in Scotland. She came over with her parents, and in 1842 she married. They were in land in North Sherbrooke, and quite the lady, because apparently the people that were living on the land in Snowroll were afraid of the Aboriginal people for some reason. They weren't getting along. Well, she liked them, and she wanted to become friends with them. So they traded land, and they moved in there and they got along very well. But they were the only settlers that lived in that area at the time. This was Granny Smith and her husband, and then they had all the children. The last one was 1857. But her husband died from another drowning accident, which was quite common down there with a lot of criminals. And then she married in 1861, and then in 1869, and then in 1876. She was very busy lady. So I thought you'd like that. I found that quite fascinating. No? Any questions? The comical way.
Any record of her unmarrying anybody?
No. The last one was a teacher. He was they married in 1976.
But did the others die then?
Yeah, they died naturally.
So I won't be offended if anybody leaves because we're late. But I have a couple of things. You can ignore that one. Conference, early bird registration ends February 28th, so you might want to consider registering now if you want. I had an email from this Shannon Kelly. I should do this as a slideshow. This Shannon Kelly, they've got a speaker coming to the Huguenot Shores Museum, the Heritage Center and Archives, which I believe are on the second floor of the arena in Port Perry, and it's the Immigrant Letters of Francis Stewart. And Jody Aoki has written a book about Francis Stewart, $10 a person. Okay. Next webinar is about the Women's Institute, the Tweedsmuir Histories, which is another source that you can mine for your families. Scottish SIG of the OGS has a membership meeting February the 9th. And you can go to the webinar registration page, and it's on the right-hand side if you're a member of the Scottish SIG. We don't need that one. Our next meeting, Dave Clements will be talking about the barber, the bishop, and Lucy in honor of Black History Month, 6 days late. Okay, everyone's welcome. I mentioned our special interest group for DNA, Wednesday, February 21st at 7 p.m. And that's it. Yes.
I recently saw a notification also a very conference we held in
Yeah, it's Ottawa or Toronto? U of T. Do you have a date by any chance?
It's from June 11th.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll research that and have it for the next meeting then. Okay? Remind me. Okay. Any other questions before we? Oh, Dan.
Well, I just wondered if anyone here might also have some suggestions for us moving unless it's already decided. Place that, because the city was giving us a good deal, and the city supports the museum. But now there's no place for us in the city building, so.
Yeah, the city just very nicely told us we're tearing your building down. We have nowhere else for you, so sorry. Try a church basement. But in a nice way. They did say it in a nice way. They had actually looked around. I think they even contacted Simcoe United and asked if they had room. The hard part is our library. If it was just the meeting, we can go on, we could stay here, but it's finding a place for the library, and I think we've got it at this particular church. We haven't signed a contract yet, so if anybody right now has a brilliant idea of a place that would take us relatively cheaply, come and whisper it in my ear, because we will look into it. But I think we found our best deal at this point. Okay? Well, then, thank you very much for coming, and drive safely.
There's a whole bunch of families magazines on the back table there, and some old CDs from English magazines. The CDs may or may not work in a modern computer, I'm not sure. You take your chances on those, but since everything's free, it doesn't matter. If you can't use it for that, you can make yourself a mousetrap roadster. Okay, but help yourself. Take as many as you want.
Thanks.